Happy first Sunday after Epiphany. And actually, all of the Sundays here for the next little while will be, X Sundays after Epiphany. It's also the Sunday of Jesus' baptism. So, that's something too. When we commemorate that event as a church. Epiphany on the 6th that just happened. There are readings just for that, and that's actually what I'm going to be reading for you today. Is the reading from Epiphany, but there's a different reading, of course, the one about Jesus being baptized. Is for today too. Happy New Year! Thank you guys for sticking it through. I've got my jacket on because it's 50 degrees out here, but we've got a soldier on, and you'll see. I'm gonna tilt it up here, see how clear the sky is. There. Okay, there were a lot of trees, but it's a beautiful day out. If it wasn't, just on the chilly side, for that. But glad we all made it to 2021. Certainly has been a tumultuous week, so maybe 2021 is just continuation, because still in quarantine, and all the other stuff's happening, so who knows. Luckily, God's with us through the whole thing, and in terms of upheavals that are happening, it certainly has been a year of all sorts of stuff going on, and then political upheaval as well going on. And yet when you look at what God had brought God's people through historically, then you have a sense of that God really has been with us as a people through all of it, and certainly much worse, and we can certainly gain comfort from the fact that when we rely on God and not the transient thing of the moment, we really have a sense that we can be God's people in a way that maybe wasn't always apparent to us. So here we go. This is one other thing, and I think I mentioned this last year about the same time too, was that you'll notice that it was 12 days from Christmas to Epiphany, and that's the 12 days of Christmas. The 12 days don't happen before Christmas. The 12 days of Christmas are starting at Christmas and ending at the Feast of the Three Kings, Epiphany. So that's what that's for. So that when they would commemorate those 12 days of Christmas, which, by the way, if you gave one gift on day one, and then 3 gifts on day 2, because you gave another partridge in a pear tree plus 2 turtle doves, then on the next day you give 1 plus 2 plus 3, and then 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, then by the time you get to day 12, you've actually given 360 gifts, which isn't bad. So you've got to, it's not just on the 12th day of Christmas, you're giving another partridge in another pear tree. So in order to really do the gifts, you had to have 12 pear trees and 12 partridges, which is just as well, because those of you that have eaten partridge know you don't get much out of one partridge. There's just not a whole lot there. And certainly if you're going to have Epiphany dinner, you probably want 12. So that's not bad. And then to have it with pears, that's kind of fancy. So the 6th then was the Feast of Epiphany, the reminder of that, and just a little English lesson or English reminder. Remember Epi, E-P-I, as in Episcopal, or Epiphany, or Epicenter. All of those use Epi as meaning above, over. So the epicenter of a earthquake is the center on the surface of the earth, but they call that the epicenter because, of course, the earthquake happened below, 3 miles below the earth. And so they're just telling you, if you found out where it happened underground and then went up here, that's why they call it the epicenter. It's the one that happened above the actual place where it happened. Episcopal, epi, over, scope, scopus means to look or see. So Episcopal meant to oversee, to overlook, supervise. Which, by the way, epi is the Greek derivative for over. Super is the Latin derivative for over. So episkopos meant oversee. Supervisio meant to oversee. Super means over and visio means to see. So when you boil them both down to their roots, episcopal and supervise means the same thing. That's what that was for. So Epiphany then has its root in epi, above, from above, which you'll see is important here. And this is Matthew 2, as you might have guessed. And as I'm reading this, please feel free to hum to yourself, "We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts, we traverse afar." Unless you're like my brother and I when we were kids and we sang about "We three kings of Orient are, tried to smoke a rubber cigar." Not quite the same sense of reverence. When Jesus was born in the village of Bethlehem in Judea, Herod was king. During his time, some wise men from the east came to Jerusalem and said, "Where is the child born to be king of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." This is why they were thought of when we talk about magi. We talk about, instead of the just kings, this says wise men, but which is the same as magi. But the idea was that, especially in Eastern kingdoms, the wise men would have been astronomers / astrologers on their own, or they had people working for them that did. So the star that we show in our Christmas pageants, that's, like this massive, huge thing, it would have been more subtle than that. Like on the solstice in December, when they said, "Oh, Jupiter and Saturn are in a conjunction and look like one star," and they do, although if you go out and looked, if you weren't looking through something, or if you hadn't kept track, you probably wouldn't have noticed. If you did keep track, then you saw what was going on. You saw that it was a conjunction, and then that was like a thing. But for normal Jamocha Joe goes out there and looks up in the sky and stars. What do I know? They knew because the heavens were important to them. That told stuff. But not just the heavens, as we'll see. Verse 3. When King Herod heard about this, he was worried, and so was everyone else in Jerusalem. Herod brought together the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and chief priests of the law of Moses, and asked them, "Where will the Messiah be born?" And they told him, "He will be born in Bethlehem, just as the prophet wrote. Bethlehem in the land of Judea, you are very important among the towns of Judea. From your town will come a leader who will be like a shepherd for my people Israel." Herod secretly called in the wise men and asked him when they had first seen the star. He told them, "Go to Bethlehem, search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, let me know. I want to go and worship him too." And then his nose grew longer because, the whole Pinocchio thing. The wise men listened to what the king said and left. The star they had seen in the east went on ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. They were thrilled and excited to see the star. When the men went into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and worshipped him. They took out their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh and gave it to them. Later they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and they went back home by another road. And there it was, the visit of the wise men. And the whole deal of us calling it Epiphany then, there are traditions that call it Three Kings Day, so, that's something. Because that's how many people came. But the whole idea of Epiphany, the revelation from above, was that the wise men wouldn't have known this on their own. They had studied the scriptures to think of, going in that direction. They had been looking at the heavens, which declare the glory of God, too. And so they came to find the one who had been promised. So that the knowledge that they got, that they knew about, wasn't from them. It was revealed to them. It came from outside. They didn't they didn't figure it out on their own. But they were looking for it. They wanted to know where they could find the Messiah to worship him. They wanted to know, who is it that God is sending? And we want to be a part of this. We want to be a part of it. We want to figure out what's God doing in the world. And they wanted to have their pulse on that, because it was that important to them to do that. So that they looked to the scriptures. They had access to that. And they looked to what God was doing in the heavens. Now, they thought of the heavens, as far as we can tell, in a more astrological way, which, you and I do not. But they recognized that God, as master of all creation, of everything, also rules the heavens and, makes that happen. So it wasn't inconsistent for them to come up and say, we want to know what God's up to. And here's how we'll find out. And in that way, be a part of what God has happening in the world, which is pretty cool. Which means that when you and I are looking in the Word as well, that God can give us that same sense of epiphany to worship God in the same way. That we can experience an epiphany and not just experience it, but be a part of it. The wise men, by worshiping, by offering their gifts, were being a part of what God was up to in the world. They were connecting themselves with it. And that's had repercussions throughout the centuries. I was just reading about a place in India where Thomas was supposed to have gone. Doubting Thomas. Ended up in India. And that there were Christians there that had worshipped in the same way for thousands of years, for almost 2,000 years. Because that's where Thomas had come. You know what? I mean, it's not the only place he went. But he went there and began the church, and those people are still there, worshiping God, being God's people, because he was faithful in sharing the epiphany he received, just like you and me. So that faithfulness ripples down through the years. And you know what happened with the wise men, because I just read you about it. And it's more than just, you know, we dress up in purple robes every Christmas and have, you know, 3 kids bring in boxes that look like gold and frankincense and myrrh. The reality is that we are inheritors of what the wise men did, because we recognize that, you know, as we inherited our faith, you know, I mean, I don't mean to say that you and I can inherit our faith, but we are inheritors of the traditions that help to carry that on. You and I, as well as everyone else, has to make their own decisions about our faith, but we're still inheritors of those traditions, of those examples, of the you know, men and women of faith from far back that that we look to as part of those cloud of witnesses. And as such, we pass on that same sense of epiphany, the same sense of God revealing himself to us, wherever that happened. Mine was in church. Didn't happen that way with everybody. But we recognize that, you know, as people that are carrying on that line, you know, we bring it forward as well. And that the worship we give to God, the worship that you and I give to God, that we have derived from our own everyday worship, our own sense of how to relate that to the world right now, today, will carry on in the future for those that come behind us, so that our faithfulness will have those same ripples down through time as we're faithful. The wise men, as they traveled, had to know about, you know, what was going on. That travel back then meant to, you know, you were, well, a camel or a donkey or whatever they were riding on. It was slow going. You had to modify your route. You had to know where to go. They had to figure out who, you know, I got to talk to Herod over there and know who was king. They had to be aware of the world so that their worship would have the difference that it needed to make. And same with you and I. The message doesn't change because of the world. The message of God's love is always the same. But we're not going to say it in ancient Greek today. We're going to say it in English because that's the way people understand it today. And in that same way, we will, in our own lives, in living our faithful lives in community, in this case in a long distance community, but still in living our faithful lives and worshiping God in that way, we carry on the Epiphany in the same way. So it's pretty cool that we can do that we can be a part of what God's doing in the world right now because of God's revelation to us and through us. And those are the gifts we bring. So, happy Epiphany. Glad you guys are hanging in there. Thank you for your continued engagement with the church and continuing on. And I love you guys. And we'll catch you later. Bye.